The state agriculture director resigns, and the governor starts his second year in office. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me here today to talk about interesting things happening in Springfield, especially starting soon. Charlie Wheeler is back. He is retired director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program, University of Illinois Springfield. Also, many-year reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times at the Capitol. Charlie, welcome back.
Thank you. It's always fun to be here.
And Rebecca Anzel is back. She is a State House reporter with Capital News Illinois. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the big shocker since the last time one of these shows was done, John Sullivan is now out as Director of Agriculture. John Sullivan, longtime state senator from Rushville, kind of a moderate to conservative Democrat, knows agriculture well because had actually gone back to his family business in the agriculture sales business and what do you call that when people auction business, yes.
Yes.
And
he was a very well-known auctioneer before he came to the Senate.
That's right.
And farmer in Western
Illinois. He got caught in this issue about emails. An email that had been sent by Mike McLean of Quincy, who is a former state representative, longtime lobbyist for Commonwealth Edison and other things, who sent an email in 2012 saying that someone who worked at a state facility in Rushville should get a break on something that disciplinary action because he had been quiet about something about patronage and something about a rape in Champaign that we still don't know as we tape this what it's about. And John Sullivan Charlie had read that, or had been sent that, and said actually he didn't read that part.
I think that's a distinction because Sullivan accepted responsibility. He said, I should have read it, but he said that it was unintentional. He didn't read it. And he mentioned he did an interview, I think it was with Capital News, right?
Well, the Rushville Times, and we published it.
Yeah, and it was that McLean sent out a lot of emails, and I really didn't read them all. Now, I can relate to that because I'll confess it up front, I don't read every email that I get. And I'm guessing you guys don't either. Most of the viewers probably don't either. And he probably figured, this is just another thing McLean promoting something or other, and he didn't pay any attention to it. And he said when the story broke, he went back and looked through his email file and discovered it, and then he realized that he should have done something. Had he known, he would have alerted the authorities. Right. So that's kind of where it stands now. And I tend to believe Sullivan because his reputation, he was always a straightforward, straight shooter as a senator. And apparently, at least Governor Pritzker said even that he did a good job as agriculture director.
Yeah, Rebecca, it was kind of a shock to everybody, but if you did some reporting on the local reaction, everybody, in my time in Springfield, very well respected on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, that's what everybody in the press corps was saying, was he was such a nice guy. He knew what he was talking about. And as Charlie said, he had said he didn't read the email. If he had, he took full responsibility for it. He said that he knew what the optics were of not having seen it. But he, at the time, I believe, was being treated for cancer, and so he said it was sort of a rough time. And it was even out of state getting some cancer treatment, apparently. Right about that time.
Running for re-election as well.
Right, so busy time. And I know one of the things the governor said is that as it became legal for farmers to grow hemp in Illinois, John Sullivan, as Director of Department of Ag, in his new role that he was named to by Governor Pritzker, oversaw the promulgation of rules for that, which is a complicated process, as watching state government, you know best of all, Charlie.
That is true.
So we don't know exactly where all of this is going. The governor was asked about this in an event in Chicago. He talked about, as you would expect, he demands ethics from people and wants his people to live up to an even higher standard than some others. And he talked about there is a gathering storm for people who are headed in the wrong direction, the people who created this culture, the people who are contributing to it. In other words, if you're not doing the right thing in government, watch out, because there should be a time where you will pay the price for that. But I guess that's the kind of thing governors say, and we'll see what happens.
Governor Pritzker just really seems to have, as you said, an expectation that he holds himself to and that he expects his staff to hold themselves to. And I think this is a good example of the governor saying something and also following through on it too.
Yeah, I think that's the general impression. Of course, he keeps getting these thorny questions from reporters. Well, what about Speaker Madigan, who has not been accused of any wrongdoing, but Mike McLean is good friends with Speaker Madigan. Speaker Madigan claims he didn't know about that email until he saw the report of it. Charlie, that's just a kind of a continuing theme in state government, especially if you're a Republican in the minority looking at the Democrats, some of whom are getting in trouble with things, saying, oh, what about Speaker Madigan? So,
yeah, and Madigan has been the what would you say, the number one punching bag for Republicans for, gosh, I don't know how many years. Even back in the days when I was a reporter, opposition ads would point out that this Democrat voted so many times, downstate Democrat voted so many times with Speaker Madigan. And then it would turn out, people would do research and they'd say, oh yeah, guess what? The Republican leader voted most of the time with Madigan too, because as you guys know, having watched it, most of the votes in the Illinois House, as in the Illinois Senate, are not controversial, are not partisan votes. They're generally the kind of thing where they have lopsided majorities in favor of the thing. But yeah, Madigan is also, I suspect, a prime target for any U.S. attorney. If you want to, put skins up on the wall, what better skin to get than the longest-serving House Speaker in the United States of American history?
Well, we will see where that goes. On the issue of ethics, Comptroller Mendoza also came out this last week and used the example of a couple of now former legislators who stayed on, in her view, perhaps a day too long. Senator Martin Sandoval and Luis Arroyo, both either under scrutiny or in more trouble with the law. Arroyo is indicted. Sandoval is under investigation. His office was raided by federal officials. Still no charges against him, and we don't know exactly where that's going. But Rebecca, why don't you explain what she said about their pay?
So under current law, lawmakers are cut checks once a month at the last working day of that month. And so if a lawmaker, in both of the two cases you cited, works one day in a month, they are paid for the entire month. And in some instances, if their replacement is named in that month too, that replacement gets the entire month's salary as well. And so she was saying this is ridiculous. She cuts the checks for everybody, and so she, a spokesperson had said that this is something she was aware of, but it was put on the back burner until Senator Sandoval and Representative Arroyo had sort of decided to resign
when Sandoval,
on the first day.
Yeah, said he announced his resignation, but it was a few weeks before the first day of the next month, so he could get paid for a month.
Well, in Arroyo's case, he was charged on a Monday, and then he waited to resign until Friday, which was the first day of November. And coincidentally, or not coincidentally, there was also a hearing scheduled in Chicago to look into basically whether he was suitable to serve as a legislator being under indictment. Sandoval, his offices were raided in September, and he waited until January 1st before he resigned. And so he got paid for the full month of January.
Yeah, and of course,
and it's not just Democrats. If you recall back in, I think it was August of 2018, Nick Sauer, who was charged with, I forget the specific nature of the crime, but he had sent out
some kind of sexting thing.
Yeah, he sent out explicit photos of a woman, and she didn't consent to him, so he was charged with that. And he waited until the 1st of August to resign, although he had been charged prior. But as we were talking before the show, once upon a time back in the day when I started as a reporter, yikes, 50 years ago, lawmakers on the first day of the session, they got elected in November, they were sworn in January, and in January they got paid 2 years for the full,
For the full
length
term.
of the term.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, in those days, what did they make? Like $4,500 a year? I mean, obviously.
Well, it was a lot less.
Yeah.
Although I don't know what would be adjusted
Yeah,
for
because
inflation.
now their base pay is what, about 70-ish, 67? It used to be 60. I think it's up
60
to,
cents. Yeah.
yeah, 70 plus whatever they get stipends for being committee chairs or spokespersons, a lot of which occurs. Just
But I
going
mean,
back.
that strikes me as the kind of change that would resonate with the public, because there's very few people who get paid ahead of time. When I was at the Sun-Times, when I was at the university, I never got paid ahead of time.
Right,
It was
right.
always afterwards.
People love to hate legislators for getting
Yeah,
paid,
and so this
and
is,
especially
everybody
if there's
should be
any kind of
for this
advantage. Yeah,
and say, yeah, you as Mendoza suggested, why not put lawmakers on the same schedule as every other state employee, or virtually every other state employee, where you get paid every 2 weeks, and you get paid for what you've worked, and if you quit in the middle, then you don't get paid for those extra days.
yeah. I'll bet she gets this changed, but of course there's a timing factor because I think it's under the Constitution or interpretation of it, you can't change the pay of an elected official in the middle of their term, so it'll have to be after the next election probably.
Well, but
whatever
as a
happens.
practical matter, you're not likely to do it immediately anyway, because they'll come back in session in a week or so. They could pass it in the spring, have it effective January 1st,
There you go.
before the new legislature gets sworn in.
Right. I will just say something else about this whole email that Mike McLean sent in 2012. WBEZ in Chicago broke that story. Their reporters encountered Mike McLean in Chicago recently, and he basically told them that he's been asked to cooperate with authorities, but when asked if that would be like a betrayal of Mike Madigan, he was quoted as saying it would be hard, or he said it would be hard to betray myself, and apparently he was smiling or whatever, and then Governor Pritzker was like, you shouldn't be smiling if you're saying these kinds of things. So it's just one of these odd ongoing stories, and we just don't know where it's going, but it seems to involve a lot of people. So.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, Dave McKinney, who was one of the reporters.
Another Sun-Times alum.
Yes, and with Tony Arnold, who've been doing this story. They caught McLean coming out of a Chicago steakhouse, and McKinney tweeted how it was strange because McLean was just standing there like he was posing and smiling, and the photog was just shooting pictures all the time, which then wound up on the Twitter. It was as though he was, well, Dave didn't really know what he was doing, but it was certainly unlike other people who sort of been in the crosshairs of U.S. attorneys, how they react when reporters come up to them.
Well, it's also interesting though, they did go there, and I don't believe he had commented publicly before.
No,
he hadn't
no.
been returning phone calls from people
And
who
he
were trying to
certainly
get
wasn't trying to lay low because he
Right.
was at
Yeah.
this
Well,
place
perhaps-
that's, hang out for Chicago
Perhaps
pals.
he's watched enough TV to know that, once you are confronted on the street, if you walk away or run away, it doesn't look great. But who knows? There's got to be probably a happy medium somewhere in here. So, as we tape this show, we are awaiting Sunday events, which will likely see, or at least start the process to see, a new president of the Illinois Senate. Rebecca, we've got, looks like Kimberly Lightford of Maywood and Don Harmon of Oak Park are the key prospects. LG Sims, from what we have heard, at least what Kimberly Lightford says, she has LG Sims support now, but it's not sure this will all happen quickly.
No, the Senate Democrats are expected to meet in a private caucus at 11 o'clock in the morning. Session is scheduled to begin around noon.
Yeah, or at least that's what's on the schedule.
Yeah.
But that just means they have to set some time. So it depends if they actually reach agreement. I'm told if it actually will begin at that time.
Right, and then there's also Senator Lightford had said that she gained Senator Sims's vote, and that he was resigning or pulling back out of the race. The Sun-Times reported that they asked him when he was in Chicago the other day, and he wouldn't confirm that he did that. So I don't know what that means, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, Charlie, as you know, John Cullerton has been Senate president for, I think, more than a decade now, and is stepping down, and will be stepping down in this process, where actually the election will have to be overseen by the governor, the way everybody's interpreting the Constitution and Senate rules. So the governor's supposed to be on hand. It'd be an interesting transition for someone to take over for Cullerton at this point. Do you think this will block any of the, I guess, momentum that the Democrats had? They have such an overwhelming majority in the Senate, and that, I think they've done well under Cullerton. They've gotten a lot of the policy stuff that they wanted. A lot of Governor Pritzker's proposals from last year, they passed so easily through the Senate because it's a Democratic governor and a Democratic Senate. Do we expect things to be smooth?
I honestly don't know. You would assume that it would be, but on the other hand, if you look back in history, there have been occasions when it hasn't. I mean, this month happens to be the 45th anniversary of a historic battle over who's going to be the next Illinois Speaker of the House. And the governor had one candidate, the Republicans had a candidate, Mayor Daley, Richard J. Daley, the first Mayor Daley, had a third candidate. When all was said and done, 93 ballots later, a fourth person emerged as the Speaker, who nobody thought about at the beginning.
Would that be Bill Redmond?
That was Bill Redmond, yeah. And you can see the situation where it looks like Senator Lightford may have kind of an edge because Senator Sims reportedly endorsed her. Senator Harmon's in there. Both of them are progressives. It's not as though one's a flaming conservative, the other's a flaming liberal. They're both progressive. They both have pretty much the same agenda. So whichever of those persons emerges as the Senate president, or if some third dark horse emerges, I would expect that the Senate Democrats would still be pretty much on the same page in terms of doing the things that Governor Pritzker is interested in doing, carrying forward this kind of progressive agenda.
Yeah, we will keep an eye, and for those working that day, I hope it goes quickly. Or for those who are, I know, very, very interesting. And I don't mean to date myself, but Speaker Redmond was Speaker when I first started covering the legislature, so goodness gracious. So Governor Pritzker did a round of interviews with lots of folks. I got one, several news outlets got them. Given that he has now passed a year in office, on January 14th was the anniversary of his inauguration. He did talk about, they've passed so many things, abortion protections, a $45 billion capital plan, legalization of sports betting, legalization of cannabis for adult use, along with reforms that will allow the expungement of thousands of people's records for low-level marijuana convictions. Lots of stuff that got done, some of it with a little pain because they had to raise the gas tax, for example, to double the 19 cents to pay for the road part of the construction program. He talked about he wants ethics transparency in the future, and he wants to do something at the state level to lower property taxes. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's honeymoon time or not, because clearly taxation is a problem for people who don't like it. But the governor was certainly talking about a little victory lap, I guess, or trying to do so. How's that looking, Charlie?
Yeah, I suspect there'll be a couple of big issues that will be facing him. The very first one, of course, is to do a balanced budget for fiscal 2021, and the uncertainty there is whether or not voters will approve the constitutional amendment to go from a flat tax to allow a graduated income tax, where higher income levels have a higher rate of taxation.
Yeah, of course, that vote by voters doesn't even come till November, so
right.
I don't know if he will factor that into a budget for this next
that's
fiscal
what
year
the uncertainty is,
yeah.
Because the budget is going to start on July 1st, and it's going to run through to the following June 30th, which is 7 months after the election, where voters may or may not agree to go to the graduated income tax. So how do you factor in the fact that maybe we'll have a huge windfall, or on the other hand, maybe we'll be really scratching around? So that's a problem. I suspect he also will want to get involved with ethics, proposing changes to deal with the culture. Although I would note as an aside, all the stuff that we read about people being arrested and people being charged, that's all because they violate what the law is already.
And the governor did mention that when I asked him
so
about
I'm not
ethics
sure
too.
if you pass more laws, that necessarily is going to.
There is this perception, I know, that always the public wants the legislature to do more when you catch ethical problems, and just like
everybody
when they get paid.
who's gone to jail,
That's right.
there's dozens of them. It's because they violated what was already the law.
Right.
And he'll want to do something on property taxes.
Yeah, and how? Yeah, so.
Property
Property taxes are paid by local taxpayers, and so the governor says, already one of the other accomplishments of the year, which happened in the veto session, was the legislature voted to consolidate police and fire pension systems downstate into two big pools of money and to save costs on administration and also earn more through better management of those funds. But it's a tough sell because everybody really cares about property taxes.
Yeah, and property taxes are really hard in the state, as Charlie, as I learned from Charlie when I was in PAR, was that is chiefly how schools are funded, and so that it's going to be an interesting thing to see how he handles that, or if he can.
Yeah, obviously he talks about, more money has gone to schools from the state, but the state used to spend, I think, or provide years ago, like a couple decades ago, I think it was 48% of local school funding, and now it's down to 25 or 26%, or at least it has been in recent years. And the governor is working on improving that, but it all costs money, and that's just a difficult thing because the state's always squeezed.
And that's probably the key to reducing property taxes, is to figure out how to get the support of public schools off of property tax and onto what I would call a fairer tax in the sense of an income tax. Property does not measure one's wealth the way it did in the 19th century when the property tax was first created for schools. And it was in the mid-1800s. And now income is a better measurement. But something like 60% of property taxes, according to the Department of Revenue latest figures, go to public schools. And so you have to do something to reduce the burden. And one of the suggestions that's been made is to take income tax dollars and give the school district income tax in return for the school district abating some of the property tax levy. In other words, I say to you, I'm the state of Illinois school board, here's $1. You, as the school board, say, okay, property taxpayers, we're going to ask you for $1 less. Mm-hmm. That's oversimplified, but that would be one way to do it.
Right.
And that's, as I say, that's the biggest chunk. Another suggestion that's been made that I think has some merit is to consolidate some of these units of local government. We have more units of local government than any other state in the union, by far.
And put high school districts and grade school districts, elementary school districts together. Again, it's tough to do just because there's always local resistance to that.
Well, and part of it is that every one of these 2,000 different units of government, mosquito abatement districts, fire protection districts, library districts, here in Springfield, a convention district, they all have boards. They have people whose vested interest is in maintaining the status quo, and it's hard to go against that.
And it's kind of the political farm team too, because people run for those boards. So, very, very interesting. We will kind of see where it goes. On another, and by the way, I should mention that Republicans had another press conference this last week at the State House talking about the property tax task force that's working out there, and Republicans keep arguing that their ideas are not getting attention from the Democrats, whereas the governor and the Democrats say, we're open to your ideas, you're just talking too soon, and wait till we see what happens in the session.
And I think in fairness, we should point out that probably one of the major things that Republicans would like to see is addressing the pension costs, because a substantial portion of local government revenues goes to pay pension costs, the unfunded liability. I believe here in Springfield, almost all of the city taxes go to police and fire prevention, the city property taxes, the city levy.
Interesting. Rebecca, I think you worked on a story about the Equal Rights Amendment. This is a long time issue, but another state has now passed it. Illinois passed it a year ago?
2 years ago.
And some people say the deadline is passed to get to have states approve it, to get it on the U.S. Constitution, but Illinois advocates still think it can happen, right?
Yeah, so Republican former Representative Stephen Anderson, I believe he's from Geneva, he was a huge proponent. He was helping former Representative Lou Lang, a Democrat from Skokie, try to push that through 2 years ago. And he found out 2 days ago on Tuesday at like 3 o'clock, he was in the Loop in Chicago, and he heard that Virginia was going to call for a vote the next day. So he drove 12 hours to Virginia, got 4 hours of sleep, and watched them pass it. There are some questions. The Congress had instituted a deadline of 1982 to get 38 states approval, and there are some questions now that 38 states have approved it, whether that deadline has to be honored.
It'll be up
We'll
to
see.
some court somewhere.
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
All right. Well, as we're getting close to the end here, but I should say that Ray LaHood was back in Springfield this week. He's a former U.S. Secretary of Transportation, former congressman from Peoria. His district included Springfield. Part of Springfield. He's a Republican, but Democrat Barack Obama, as president, named him U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary. Governor Pritzker, a Democrat, named him the head of the board of trustees over the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum, trying to make things work more smoothly there, get one board working together and avoid certain problems that they've had, like buying a hat that they weren't sure is Lincoln's. We will see what happens. Interestingly, I did get to interview him, and he's a Republican, but he said he did not vote for Trump in 2016. He will not in 2020 because it's not his kind of politician. He doesn't like what Trump says about people. Interestingly, his son Darren LaHood is a congressman now in the 18th Congressional District, who is a honorary co-chair of the Trump re-election campaign in Illinois, was actually at the White House as Ray LaHood was in Springfield because the president was signing the deal with China and actually called out many officials, including Darren LaHood. Ray LaHood says he's proud of his son. Obviously, they disagree on some things. So just an interesting Central Illinois story. We'll see where that goes. But so far, the Republicans in Illinois, certainly in major issues as the impeachment moves forward in Washington, have stuck with the president. We'll see where it goes. With that, we have to end it for the week. Charlie Wheeler and Rebecca Anzel, thanks for your thoughts. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.